So I'll tell you a bit about why we chose to do this topic, what peptides are, why they are so pharmacologically attractive, and then I'll leave Dr. Luis Martinez to talk to you about some case studies and examples. So we decided to pursue this topic because obviously in the US, at least, peptides and therapeutics have been quite popular for some time now. So even if you read anything as Goop or GQ, you'll see that peptide therapeutics have been getting a lot of attention and have been mentioned in the context of wellness and recovery as well as longevity. And at Glycan Age, we normally deal with quite a quite a few inquiries about peptides and how their use might change somebody's biological age. I would also say that having recently attended the A4M conference in Las Vegas end of last year, that's also a topic that's been explored there in the context of mapping the longevity blueprint. So I think this is just one attempt from Glycan Age to sort of bring this topic to our attention and to see how actually we can use peptides in the context of longevity medicine. So just some basic science very briefly at the start. So what are these peptides? So it's good to sort of zoom out a bit and then zoom in on the basic building blocks of peptides, which would be amino acids, which when combined to form chains, these different amino acids combined and sort of brought together by peptide bonds basically make peptides. The definition of how many amino acids you should normally look for in the peptide, well, that ranges in between 2 all the way to 50. But we most often talk about peptides and their molecular weights being between 500 and 5,000 daltons. Putting that aside, obviously, when you have larger peptides with sort of longer chains, that would be your polypeptide. And when you combine 2 or more polypeptides, you basically get your protein. More importantly, I think functionally, peptides are hormones and neurotransmitters, growth factors, and ion channels. And I like to call them multitaskers because they do seem to have many different functions. No matter which tissue or cell look at. So we usually talk about peptides having this pleiotropic effect. So just some interaction I thought I would include here. I would like to ask you, all of you in the audience, if you could tell me which of these are naturally occurring peptides, meaning that the ones that our body makes for us. So I'll go through the list, and if I just could get some either in the chat, or I don't know if you can give me, can reply with any emojis, but what do you think about insulin? Is that a peptide or not a peptide? So insulin would be a peptide. Okay. What about oxytocin? Let's see what you say. Okay, so oxytocin is another peptide. What about our GLP-1 analogs or agonists? I think this is a fairly easy one considering all the media attention they get. So yes, that would be another one of your peptides. What about vasopressin? Just yes, no in the chat is enough. Yeah, I think I'm making it a bit too easy now, am I? So vasopressin is, again, another peptide. Okay, so the next 3, let's see what you think about the next 3. So ACTH, sorry, I kind of clicked on too fast. So that's another peptide. Leptin, would that be a peptide? leptin is another peptide. And then BNP, I think the acronym says that we can see letter P there. So yes, that's another peptide of yours. So basically, this is just to show you how many of them there are really. I mean, I just kind of pulled some of those more famous ones, but basically peptides are everywhere, and they do really many different things for us. So just briefly on the sort of therapeutics development side of things. So the first peptide that was ever used as a therapeutic that you may know of was insulin, and that was just over 100 years ago. And in the first few years, it basically went on from just about being used to being massively produced, which meant that insulin that came from animals and was animal derived wasn't enough. So we started using recombinant insulin. And then there's time when the by when I mean pharma industry and biotech realized that yes, we can use the peptides that we naturally make, but we can make them slightly different in our favor, meaning that we can make them more stable or more longer lasting. So this is what the second category would be, so the peptide mimicking drugs. And here are all of your GLP-1 agonists, Ozempic, Trulicity, and Rybelsus. And I think this is probably the most important modification that we realized that help us use peptides in a larger variety of different cases and scenarios. And lastly, there are also some peptides of natural origin, other natural origin. So, for example, snake venom has been used as a VEGF analog. So, definitely widely used. So what makes them so pharmacologically attractive? Before I tell you that, I'd just like to draw your attention to this figure, which shows you on y-axis, obviously sales in billions of dollars in 2019, and these are all the top-selling non-insulin peptides. And obviously, if you look at this, you will see the first three are your GLP-1 agonists, and the sales profit is just mind-blowing here. And for anybody actually interested in just understanding a bit more about peptide therapeutics development, I can highly recommend the paper that was cited here. And if I'm not wrong, we'll be distributing the slides afterwards. So you can just click on the link. It provides a really nice overview. But yes, you see that obviously apart from GLP-1 agonists, there are other peptides here. Some are your growth hormone secretagogues. So definitely a wide variety, but in terms of profit, I think there is no stopping them right now. And actually, if you look back in the last, so from the beginning of this century until now, you'll see that the FDA in the States approved more than 30 peptides as drugs, and actually a vast majority of those were approved in the period from 2016 to 2022. So I think we'll just be seeing more and more of these being used. Why peptides and why not small molecules such as aspirin or biologics? The size matters here. So obviously, if you compare small molecules such as aspirin to a peptide to a biologic, I think that's the best analogy would be if you compared a bike, a small molecule, to a car, a peptide, and a plane. That would be your biologic therapeutic. Peptides are, because of that size and some of the other traits they have. So if you compare them to small molecules, they would be more specific, would have a good safety profile and good efficacy. However, in comparison to small molecules, they are less stable and have lower membrane permeability and shorter half-life. So obviously all of these sets of benefits come with some drawbacks as well. In comparison to biologics, they are not as expensive. They do have better membrane permeability, which means they're able to get into a cellular compartment they need to get into and have low immunogenicity. But again, in comparison to biologics, they would be less stable and have a shorter half-life. So that would be just the summary of why you would want to choose a peptide over either of these two other drug types. And lastly, just thinking about the use and sourcing of the peptide, which kind of goes back to all the media hype some of the peptides have been receiving. So obviously we can be talking about, which we will not be talking about today, but we could be talking about prescription peptides for certain diseases and conditions that have been pre-approved by the FDA. And obviously this is all in the context of big pharma production of these peptides. But I think what we're here today to talk about is really the off-label use of peptides. So meaning that you're prescribing peptides, obviously off-label to a patient or a client that you deem would get some benefit from it. But I think the third point, black marks of peptides that are being sold and sort of consumed as part of the black market is something that we have to be quite aware of. When I was doing some research on this topic, I came across this term, Ozempic parties, obviously referring to the massive overuse of Ozempic, as you can see in the events where people get together to take that drug, which makes them look thinner, despite the fact that there are obviously lots of side effects. So I think bearing in mind some of the good stuff that I believe Dr. Martinez will tell us about, I think it's also good to be thinking about how all of this, all of these different peptide medications can get to the black market and be used highly likely for all the wrong reasons. So this is it for me. I will just stop sharing my screen and I will allow Dr. Martinez to tell us about some practical examples.
I will talk a bit on more the clinical side, so of the peptide applications. Just a little background. I'm based out of the United States. I have offices in Florida and Puerto Rico, and I'm also very involved with physician training education on the clinical use of peptides. Here in the States, we've been using peptides for quite a few years. And for longevity purposes, age management, anti-aging purposes, I wanted to highlight just a few of the peptide categories that are more commonly used for these purposes. And most of our peptides we are able to source from compounding pharmacies. It's been a bit of a challenge with the regulatory landscape changing, constantly evolving. FDA has revised their definition of how many amino acids constitutes a peptide, so that's been challenging. But anyhow, so a few of the popular peptides. So we have in the growth hormone secretagogue category, we have a few of them like sermorelin, ipamorelin, CJC1295, tesamorelin. So these peptides are mainly used to increase the growth hormone secretion in patients. And we know that when we increase growth hormone production, we can achieve faster tissue repair, response, regeneration, improved body composition, increased muscle mass, increased fat mass, and skin repair. So it's usually these categories are very popular with patients. As they grow older, their IGF-1 levels go down. And by boosting endogenous growth hormone production, you can get some clinical benefits there. Now, this is not directly growth hormone. We're actually just stimulating, maximizing endogenous production. So in addition to the growth hormone secretagogues, we also use the thymosin, specifically thymosin alpha-1, thymosin beta-4, and thymin. The thymosins have different roles in our body. TA1 or thymosin alpha-1 is mainly for immune stimulation, immune repair. It can help fight off senescence, immunosenescence. It's been clinically studied for many, many years. Many articles published on the use of TA1. Thymosin beta 4 is more of a repair peptide that can help repair tissues. Has been studied in the field of dermatology, ophthalmology, neurology. So we use it more for acute situations. And then the thymulin, which has been sort of an in-between benefit there. It's been shown to both have anti-inflammatory benefits and also repair capacity and immunomodulating benefits. Following on the peptide categories that we use, when we look at longevity, we're talking about epithalon, pineolon, they're pineal-derived peptides, and we also have peptides more focused on repair and anti-inflammatory capacity, such as BPC-157 and KPB. There's also some mitochondrial peptides, mitochondrial targeted peptides, such as MOXC, SS31. Some of these peptides have already gone through clinical processes, such as SS31. So for some of these peptides, we have a lot of clinical data. There's also cosmetic peptides, such as GHK copper, which actually has a role beyond cosmetics. It's also a potent gene modulator and anti-inflammatory repair peptide too. Plus, there's many more. I mean, obviously, we don't have the time to highlight all the different peptides we're using clinically, but just wanted to give an overall overview of the different categories in which we're using peptides clinically with our patients. I know that in other parts of the world, it might be harder to get some of these peptides or easier, really depends on where you're at. I do a lot of international lecturing and consulting, and some countries are a lot easier to get peptides, others are not, but we try to do that. So what are, peptide benefits? How can they help, right? One of the things that is very positive about these peptides is that the results usually are fast enough to get clinical response relatively quickly. And peptides can help with many things: energy, metabolism, memory, cognitive, faster repair, recovery, antimicrobial benefits, improved immunity, anti-cancer effects, and obviously enhanced longevity, right? So this is part of what we're looking at and why we're using these peptides. And it's really interesting because even before peptides took off clinically in the United States, a lot of them were already being used by bodybuilders and people in the healthcare and in the wellness sector, fitness sector. So they do have a long trajectory, these peptides. And, thankfully, we're just advancing the clinical aspects. How can these peptides impact biological health, right? Or what mechanisms could potentially be involved, right? So one of them is enhancing immune function, and the other is decreasing inflammation. And if you put those two together, you get the whole concept of targeting or addressing inflammation, right? We're also seeing increased repair process and even telomerase activation. So some notable peptides with potential longevity applications. Again, this is just a very short list. I think there's many more peptides that can have these benefits, right? But I highlighted epithalon, GHK copper, thymosin alpha-1, and the growth hormone secretagogue class, right? Epithalon, it's a pineal-derived peptide, 4-amino acid chain. It was studied for many years, 9 decades in the old Soviet Union and Russia, and it's been shown to have an excellent safety profile. There's I know in Russia there were many studies on the peptide. So, and it's interesting because among the studies, it's been shown to increase telomerase activity, stimulate DNA repair, and have cells able to divide more than what would be the maximum limit. It's also shown benefits in chromatin expression, and clinically, it's increased longevity in patients' use. Right? And again, very, very, very safe. peptide. Um, GHK peptide. So this is a tripeptide, glycyl histidoglycine. It's been extensively studied for cosmetic purposes. And it's usually associated with cosmetic benefits, a lot of creams with GHK copper, a lot of formulations, topical formulations. But really interestingly, the original research looked at repair, systemic repair, body repair, organ repair with GHK copper. I actually had the benefit of interacting with Dr. Pickard, who was the one who originally discovered this peptide and published a lot on it. And and again, he was very adamant that the repair aspect, the systemic repair, was more relevant or more important than the actual cosmetic benefits, which it does have. It's great for the skin. So if you want it, your skin, you can definitely use topical GHK copper. What's really interesting is it's been studied in the I'm sorry about that, in the context of gene expression and specifically even cancer expression, and it's been shown to modulate a lot of different genes and favoring more of an anti-inflammatory profile, and it's been shown to even silence some of the uh, cancer-expressing RNAs. So we actually use it systemically in certain cancer patients and overall to stimulate repair processes. And then thymosin alpha 1, like I mentioned, extensively studied peptide, 28 amino acid sequence. It's an endogenous human peptide. It's responsible for a healthy immune system. And it's been shown to reconstitute the immune system in thymectomized animal models. So one of the things that I look at with thymosin alpha 1 is helping ward off inflammation, right? And this whole trend as we grow older towards senescence and the dysfunctional system. I've looked at using TA1. I've looked at CD4, CD8 ratios, and I've noticed improvements in the ratio, reverting inverted ratios with TA1. And of course, we use it for cancer, which is general wellness, not evident. And then, the growth hormone secretagogue, right? So I mentioned these. They will stimulate growth hormone secretion, and there's many benefits to having optimal growth hormone secretion in an aging body. And there's also some interesting studies where growth hormone has shown, for example, an impact on thymus gland rejuvenation, improving the immune system. So there's a lot of things here that are coming into play when we're. Now I have a few examples very briefly that I want to discuss. Very interesting cases. This was first one was a 56-year-old female patient of mine. She has been on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for the past 7 years. She's been using estradiol plus testosterone. And she's been doing 2 rounds of epitalon, right? 50 milligrams per cycle twice a year for the past 5 years. So she's been very active. That has been really her mainstream of treatment, the hormone replacement therapy and the epitalon, right? So she's 57. She had a glycan age of 20. And all of her blood chemistries are optimal. Look wonderfully well known. Systemic inflammation is almost zero. It's very, very controlled. She looks great, actually. She does TV, and she looks really good. And we correlated her telomere length to that of a average 27-year-old patient. So definitely there's been an impact there on what she's doing. And, we know also that estradiol therapy has a positive impact on biological age. It's been documented. So I think the combination of both doing the epitalon and having the hormone replacement therapy has been a great benefit. This second case, 62-year-old male patient, who's been also on hormone replacement therapy for the past 8 years. He did growth hormone therapy for 4 years. That was 7 years ago. After that, we just switched him over to the growth hormone secretagogue. So he was doing CJC with ipamorelin for the past 3 years. And, usually we will cycle these treatments. He was also doing the GHK copper. Works out. Biological age of 47 for this patient. And again, same thing, mainstay of treatment is the hormone replacement and these peptides that he's doing. Um, he's been doing really well. And you know what I like about the secretagogues versus actual growth hormone replacement is that with the secretagogue therapy, you don't have that risk of overdosing. It's all physiological, it's glandular production. So we're not, with growth hormone, if you go too aggressively on the dose, you can have some side effects and all that. So here we're just working with the patient and the capacity to produce. This other example with a 53-year-old male patient. So he was diagnosed at age 48 with a B-cell lymphoma. He's in full remission. He underwent both like a traditional chemotherapy, and also we also did the complementary therapies like peptide with thymosin one. He after the initial standard treatment, he has continued using thymosin alpha 1 on a weekly basis, right? And his biological age is 41. Full remission, with great CD4, CD8 ratio, and he's otherwise doing extremely well. Right? And it's interesting because usually with the cancer therapy, like the chemotherapies and such, you can observe worse outcomes. You can observe somatic cell damage. I've had some patients on have done chemotherapy that different markers of biological age. They are older, right? So with this patient, he has continued doing the thymosin alpha 1. His chemistries are perfect, and he has a good biological age. And finally, this other example, a bit different, right? So this example was a 56-year-old male patient. He has a history of hypertension, hyperlipidemia. He's obese, obesity grade 1. He's been taking metformin for 500 milligrams at night for the past 3 years. He's not a diabetic. He's not diabetic. This was recommended both as a preventive measure by his primary care practitioner, as well as, because of the longevity potential benefits of metformin, right? Usually runs with an elevated CRP around 2 to 4. He's not a very compliant person. He has not really focused on losing weight. He has never been on peptide therapy or any other biological intervention. The only thing he was doing was the metformin, right? And we also know that metformin will work differently if you are going to be diabetic or not, right? So his biological age is 77. It's extremely advanced age. He has an appointment with me in a few weeks, and I hope he can take this more seriously, make some more significant lifestyle interventions, including some peptide therapy, to help improve his parameters. Right? So, and you can see here different cases, different applications of peptides. What overall, I think we have a lot more to learn, right? But what are we seeing, Jeff? And this is a trend in my practice. I'm seeing that usually patients on the different peptide therapies are more consistently shown lower biological age. And obviously, in addition to the biological age, they're getting a good quality of life and a lot of different markers that are improving. And, like I said, peptide therapies can act relatively fast. And so that's something that patients really like. They see that impact really fast. What is still, I think, missing or still pending, obviously, we still need more research into how particular peptide combinations can impact biology. And there's many other peptides, as I mentioned, in the categories that I still want to look at and see how they can impact biological. For example, some of the mitochondria targeting peptides, MOX2, and others repair peptides such as these. So I'm very interested in just going and looking more and more how these peptides can help impact and improve biological impact in addition to other parameters. So more to come as we get more data on this, have more patients tested and follow through, and getting more practitioners in our network that are starting to implement the biological age test. So I think that we're going to be able to see a lot more on that end in the next few months, years. And, of course, if any of you want more information, you can also visit our site, Clinical Peptide Society.